The film I watched was Die Architekten, and this was a movie about Daniel. He's an architect, and he moved from West Germany to East to be part of the architecture team to construct a new city center in East Germany. So, how this film addresses divisions, boundaries, and borders is pretty much throughout the entire movie. You've got the divide of East-West Germany, which is physical, but you also have the, uh, I guess, emotional divides between Daniel and his wife Wanda, and then Daniel and his colleagues to their boss. So there's always this pushing back from the traditional socialist approaches of East Germany and the more, I guess, modern approach of the West Germans, Daniel and his colleagues. So the video uh, shows the physical contrast with the several shots they have of the East German buildings. Uh, it's mostly silent, the camera is very still, and they're focused on the buildings to show you the architecture that the boss and the East German establishment wanted Daniel and his team to build. And they were spotted throughout the entire movie, so you always had this constant reminder of what was in East Germany at the time, as opposed to what Daniel envisioned. Uh, they provided good counterpoints to the updated designs Daniel and his team were pushing. The montage when they were in their studio flipping through the draft paper of the different ideas really brought to life their idea of the city center and what they wanted to bring, as opposed to the boring block style communist structures that were already there. So there is this constant division between Daniel, his colleagues, and their boss. A good scene in the movie that demonstrated this as well was when their boss was talking to the lady. I don't remember her name, but I think it was the only female in the group, and he was questioning her about her abilities as an architect because she was a woman. Like, shouldn't she be at home raising her family instead of working? And she snidely pulls out the condom, hands it to him, says, "Well, we have arrangements for this," or or whatever she said, and gave the condom to her boss. He got mad and handed it back. So this was a good back and forth between how the old East German style viewed women, viewed the workplace, and how this Western German, this modern influence, was creeping into the workplace, where women were just as respected as men, could do the jobs just as well. And that little scene of maybe 2 minutes demonstrated all those feelings. And then, oh, actually, before that scene, when Daniel finally made it to East Germany, he was in the bar, and he was talking to the bartender, apparently an old friend of his, and asked him, "Kennst du mich nicht mehr?" And the guy looks at him coldly and goes, "Nein, nicht mehr." So obviously, what I gather was whenever Daniel left for West Germany, he didn't just physically leave, but he left his friends, his family, his relationships. He left all that for a new life. And when he came back, it's as if he didn't exist anymore. So that boundary, that division, was firmly in place, even when he was physically there. And then you have Daniel and his wife. She didn't like being in East Germany. She wanted to go back, and eventually she did go back, taking their child with them. So they always had this strife, this back and forth. What was her role in this? He had his buildings, he had his architectural dreams, and she had, in one of the scenes, what a stupid German folk song. She could just sit there and watch TV all day while he carried out his goals. So she had this struggle in her. Should she stay? Should she go? What was her place in all of this? And he didn't care. He was focused on what he was doing. He was trying to appease her as he would maybe a child rather than an adult that needs to have a life fulfilled. Eventually, she did leave. Eventually his project was canned because it was too, I guess, radical. So then the question, did we see any breaking through of these divisions, of these boundaries? Does Daniel yield to these boundaries, and at what cost? I guess ultimately I could say there was no happy ending. Daniel didn't get the job. His wife went back to West Germany, and the scene ends with him in Berlin looking through the, I guess the Berliner Tor. I think that's what it's called. Looking into the other side, looking for what I assume would have been his family. He didn't see anyone, and it felt like to me it ended on a very somber note. So that division was firmly in place throughout the entire film. So Die Architekten displayed the relationship between East and West Germany, between modernism, or I guess between capitalism and socialism. In every relationship between every person, there was always this tension, and that tension was, I guess, compounded with the shots in between scenes of the buildings, very still, silent photos of buildings, which I think was also made evident in the scene with his friend, who was the photographer that he'd brought along to photograph the entire process. Him taking, whenever they first arrived, him taking pictures of East Germany. I think that kind of showed their, I guess, their modern. It showed them being out of place, like almost as tourists, and how they wanted to change things through their lens, through the lens of the camera, through the lens of how they wanted the city to look later. So overall, he wasn't successful, but there definitely was division within the entire movie.